Lucia is our first ever Rupture-based ether support, and to say she's amazing is actually an understatement. With recent testing and experimenting, she's shaping up to be one of the best support agents we've ever seen. But we need to be careful when we talk about Lucia because there's a lot of hidden factors that are also affecting her performance. Before we get started with today's guide though, keep in mind that the footage in today's video comes from the creator beta server, so things can still change as we saw with Orphe. But if you enjoyed this kind of content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But without further ado, grab your monochrome and let's get into it. Lucia functions as a buffer who increases her team's damage, health, and rupture output by managing dream points to stay in her dream state. While this is active, she also triggers aftershocks that deal consistent ether damage and enhances her attacks. However, her true strength lies with her effectiveness with rupture-based DPS, as her additional ability grants them a strong critical damage boost when given the Darkbreaker state. Combining this with the initial sheer buff from Darkbreaker, Lucia effectively combines Jafufu's and Panyinhu's roles, making her the top rupture support in the game by far. Now, while this might make it seem like Lucia only offers damage increases and not much else in terms of uniqueness, it is very much worth noting that Lucia's damage increase to rupture agents is beyond anything we've ever seen before. However, as I'll explain later when we reach the team portion of today's video, a major reason why Lucia's performance is so strong is because of just how powerful the upcoming Deadly Assault rupture buff is. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves though, and instead take a moment to explain Lucia's kit. Dream points are at the center of Lucia's gameplay, acting as the unique resource she needs to generate in order to enter the enhanced dream state. She generates these points through the usage of skills like her special / 5th basic attack, and once her gauge is full, she can then shift into dream state where her abilities are upgraded and her team gains stronger buffs. Before entering said state, it is worth mentioning that using her special attack will generate a set number of dream points with a set cooldown, but during said state, spending dream points allows her to also enhance some of her abilities and deal respectable damage when allies land attacks. However, keeping this resource steady is incredibly important so that she can maintain uptime on her buffs. As a result, something worth noting about this balancing act is that it does often mean you'll have to be careful with using dream points with Lucia, as this could mean that you'll leave the dream state sooner, but ultimately this is dependent on your management of her resources. Lucia's core passive, Lost Nocturne, ties directly into how dream points shape her performance. Entering dream state automatically triggers a quick assist and activates Ether Veil Wellspring, which will also grant the team increased max HP for an extended duration that can also be refreshed to last nearly the entire fight. However, while the dream state is active, many of her attacks will also be buffed as previously mentioned, and she can then unleash aftershocks when her allies attack, layering in bonus damage alongside said buffs. Every time she enhances said abilities or triggers an aftershock though, her allies also gain Dreamer's Nursery Rhyme, which is a 20% damage buff that refreshes on repeat triggers. That said, the dream state ends once she runs out of dream points or leaves Ether Veil, meaning it's important to keep an eye on said gauge, especially if you don't have a way to quickly re-enter said state. Her additional ability, Ballad of the Long Night, provides team-wide synergy when paired with rupture agents, and with this, if there's a rupture or stun character in the squad, every application of Darkbreaker also applies a crit damage buff to the entire team. This of course is part of the reason why she's so fixated on rupture allies specifically, as she doesn't necessarily increase attack, but in case you're curious, I did end up testing to see how impactful this would be for non-rupture agents later in the team section. Lucia's basic attack, however, is a pretty standard 5-hit combo. That said, the final strike summons an ethereal to cleave through enemies in a wide area, and beyond simply being a damage tool, this finisher will also provide dream points when she isn't in her dream state, allowing her to re-enter said state sooner. Lucia's special comes in two parts though. The non-EX version, Symphony of the Reaper Storm, has her summon an ethereal, delivering some damage while restoring 20 dream points if she's outside dream state. This can be nice in certain cases if you need the extra dream points, but generally speaking, this is less useful than her EX special. Her actual EX special is far more impactful. Not only does it deal decent damage that scales with her max HP, it also grants her team the Darkbreaker state, increasing sheer force and crit damage. If activated while dream state and Ether Veil are up, this will also extend the buff duration, which is always nice too. In regards to her dodge and assist, her dodge and assist options also work much like those of other characters, but this time around they also generate dream points, assuming that you're outside of her dream state. To be more specific though, her quick assists provide her with 20 dream points, and her assist follow-up give her 40. However, as a reminder, this is only receivable if Lucia is not already in the dream state. Like with her other abilities, Lucia's chain attack deals decent or noticeable damage, but once again, the real value of said ability comes from gaining the 40 dream points when using said skill. Finally, her ultimate is one of her most iconic and defining abilities. Lucia charges forward mounted on an ethereal, gaining increased resistance to interruption and also reducing damage taken. However, as a side note to this, if she would otherwise die or get one shot in doing so, she'll actually stay in battle and not drop below 1 HP, which is pretty nice considering you're running around on a monster and can't really prevent yourself from getting hit. That said, you are able to swap off pretty quickly, and at the end of said charge, she slams down with a devastating strike that covers a large area, leaving behind a healing zone that regenerates HP for allies who stay inside. Now, like her other abilities as well, this duration can be extended if using said ability while also in the dream state and when Aether Veil is active, but more important than this is that using her ultimate when not in the dream state means Lucia will gain 100 dream points, and otherwise if she uses it while in the dream state, she will then gain 100 dream points again, but re-enter the dream state immediately the next time that she exits it. Overall, her ultimate is pretty nice for quality of life and for actual usability, especially considering its decent 3,800% damage multiplier. As for pre-farm, you'll need 3,705,000 dennies in order to build Lucia, and with this you'll also need 300 senior investigation logs, 25 basic ether chips, 75 advanced ether chips, 255 specialized ether chips, 4 basic support seals, 32 advanced support seals, 30 rulers support certification seals, 5 hamster cage passes if you're looking to take her skills to 12, 9 crimson miasma spikes, and 60 higher dimensional data corrupted dream steel. And now a brief disclaimer about the team testing for today's video. As I previously teased in the intro, the current deadly assault rotation is heavily skewed and shouldn't necessarily be taken as a perfectly fair measure of agent strength for a few reasons. First, because the pool of bosses that were testable is limited, some teams inevitably got forced into matchups against enemies that resisted their element, which naturally made their clear times and overall performance look slightly worse. On top of this, the buffs tied to deadly assault this time around were way more specific instead of generalized, which especially made teams including attack agents, for example, look much worse. With this, these factors made it clear that deadly assault results should definitely be read with context, and as a result, certain teams being lower than usual may not necessarily be 100% accurate to how they will typically perform. With this, if you see N/A, aka not available, this is because of how difficult or unbelievably RNG a run would have to be in order to clear said fight. In other cases, this also meant that the team could have been too low performing to even suggest, but despite these hiccups, I do still think that the testing from today's video is pretty telling and relevant. But before I go any further, finally, and I cannot stress this enough, if you don't see the exact team that you're looking for in this video, please join the Discord to take a look at the full list of clears and scores first. Though I apologize for not being able to include and talk about every lineup since this video would otherwise be hours long, I promise I've at least included or tested some variation of a team that you're looking for in said document. If this isn't the case and you still can't find the team that you're looking for, feel free to DM me with any questions, as there might be another reason for this. With this out of the way, now let's talk about a few of the Lucia teams that I tested. The strongest Lucia team right now is without a doubt Xuan, Jifufu, and Lucia. This trio was expected to dominate, and somehow it did even more than that. Xuan remains the premier rupture DPS in the game, Jifufu provides seamless synergy as her best partner, and Lucia tied the whole team together with rupture, HP, and crit damage buffs across the board. Now, as I've mentioned previously, just adding simple buffs to a team is not necessarily the most insane or original way to make a team OP, but the combination of taking a stunner, tons of crit damage, and damage percent buffs alongside sheer force increases did inevitably make for an extremely high performing lineup just because of the sheer number of buffs that were being thrown at them. This also allowed the lineup to perform incredibly quick and smooth 42-second clears with consistent 45 to even 55,000 deadly assault scores, showcasing just how powerful this team is when everything falls into place. Beyond this core, Xuan with Lucia and other supports also delivered impressive performances. A good example of this is Xuan, Qingyi, and Lucia, which finished with a 50-second clear, but still also had a deadly assault score in the 29 to 36,000 range. Another standout here was Xuan, Lucia, and Astra, pushing out a 40-second clear with 41 to 43,000 scores to match. Now, while these variations may not quite match the dominance of the Jifufu lineup, they do highlight just how strong Lucia is, even when just paired with Xuan alone. Now, I know you may be curious as to why ZenlessZoneZero Anby, a non-rupture DPS, would even make sense to be paired with Lucia, but you'd be surprised to know that ZenlessZoneZero Anby was actually the best performing lineup with Lucia, assuming you couldn't pair her with another rupture agent. This, however, is likely because of the synergy between Lucia's aftershocks, ZenlessZoneZero Anby's buffing, and also just the recent buffs to Anby, which are now live in said creator server. With this, the best Lucia performing lineup for Anby right now is Anby, your choice of Orphe/Trigger/Astra, and Lucia as the final agent. This is because of the lineup's straightforward and effective game plan, where the supports buff the team before sending ZenlessZoneZero Anby onto field, and from this point, you can then watch Anby perform decently, even without being able to find value with sheer force. Results-wise though, this left Anby with a 67 to 75 second clear and deadly assault scores in the 20 to 25,000 range. Now, while this isn't obviously the fastest or most impressive team, it was consistent, easy to run, and was technically sabotaged by the lack of proper attack buff for deadly assault in this rotation, so overall this was very promising, especially when compared to its alternatives, which were almost 8 to 11,000 points worse. Interestingly though, if you were to swap out any of these supports for Xuan, the results improved noticeably. Clear times changed to around 51 seconds, and deadly assault scores saw a rise as well, going up to about 24 to 25,000, showing just how much Xuan's higher damage could carry any team. Overall though, both versions were viable. However, the Xuan variant was clearly a lineup where Xuan and Lucia might as well have been dragging Anby to the finish line. Now I know some of you might still be curious about teams that don't perfectly align with Lucia's rupture-based synergy. There were actually still a few worth mentioning. One of the more unexpected but interesting combinations here was Miyabi, Xuan, and Lucia. And now while you could argue that Xuan had a larger impact on this team than Miyabi did still hold up quite well, and the team did clear in 52 seconds, though its deadly assault performance was noticeably weaker, landing around the 20 to 28,000 range. Another case I looked into was Orphe, who you'd imagine would have some value with Lucia through aftershock based mechanics. The best performing lineup in this case was the previously mentioned Orphe, ZenlessZoneZero, Anby, Lucia lineup, which managed a 75-second clear and anywhere between a 23 and 25,000 score in deadly assault. However, while this synergy conceptually made sense, the actual numbers didn't justify running it unless you absolutely had to, as you could definitely have found better and less rupture specific supports to pair with Anby and Orphe. Finally, I did also test anomalies with Lucia, but this was honestly pretty lackluster. Between all lineups including Yuzuha, Miyabi, Vivian, Bernice, Yanagi, etc., the best results came from Bernice when paired along Lucia and Xuan. As you'd imagine, even though this team achieved a 50-second clear with a 28,000 deadly assault score, Bernice just got onto field then left, and it was not a true anomaly-based setup by any means, as Xuan and Lucia again did 99% of the work. With the release of 2.3, every player gets access to Monado for free, and this is actually huge for new players as he's the most reliable and technically only free-to-play rupture agent in the game. That said, worry not, as his performance when paired with Lucia is way better than any other A-rank DPS that we've ever seen. What makes him stand out right now though is having Monado and Lucia available together on the same patch. This means you can then start patch 2.3 with a high-performing team lineup of Monado, Lucia, plus any support to buff Monado, giving free-to-play players a great alternative to Xuan or any premium team lineups. Regarding other performances, however, Monado's best free-to-play friendly lineup right now is Monado, Kaleda, and Lucia, and while the clear time wasn't amazing at around 77 seconds, the team still performed respectively, landing consistent 30 to 35,000 deadly assault scores, which is a very solid result for a technically completely free setup. Alternatively though, Monado, Lucy, and Lucia also performed decently, though this setup performed noticeably worse in deadly assault with a sharp 6 to 7,000 score dip. Now while neither option is as consistent as limited S-rank options, these teams were still functional and offered respectable free-to-play alternatives. Now let's talk about Lucia's build options. Lucia's signature W engine, Dreamlit Hearth, is without question her best in slot option. Not only does it provide her with much needed energy regen to keep her rotation smooth, but its effect directly complements her kit. Every time she activates Ether Veil, Dreamlit Hearth grants the entire team a massive 25% damage and 15% max HP increase that lasts a full 45 seconds. Since Ether Veil is central to her gameplay loop and something that she can reliably maintain though, this W engine essentially turns her into a permanent team-wide buffer. And while it's already nice that everything about its design feels tailor-made for Lucia, the engine having such powerful buffs for rupture agents also makes this feel like a near must-pull with how much value it has for said rupture allies. As for alternatives, the Vault is a strong secondary option. This also provides energy regen, while its passive in turn grants a 15% team-wide damage buff whenever she applies ether damage with her special or ultimate, but while not necessarily as strong or universally active as Dreamlit Hearth, it's still a very solid choice and one that you can consider, especially if her signature or the next option I'm about to talk about is taken. For those looking for a more general or more free-to-play option, Kaboom the Cannon is easily the best pick. This engine is amazing on almost every single support agent in the game, and at max rank it provides energy regen alongside team-wide attack increases whenever any ally lands an attack. Now of course, since many rupture-based DPS are less attack-based and more HP focused, this isn't necessarily the most insane option, but overall it's still an amazing choice for most players, especially since it's highly usable for other support slash DPS combos as well. Beyond this, alternatives like Weeping Cradle or Game Ball can work too. It really just depends on what you have access to. Now when it comes to her drive discs though, Lucia doesn't actually have much variety in what works best. Because she is so heavily reliant on energy regen to keep her EX special and dream state active, her strongest 4-piece option is Moonlit Lullaby. Not only does this provide the energy regen that she desperately needs though, but its 4-piece set effect also gives the team a flat 18% damage increase, making it a perfect fit for her supportive solid role. If you don't have a full set of Moonlit Lullaby ready though, the fallback option here is Swing Jazz, which is essentially a weaker version. That said, this does still grant energy regen, so it is still decently strong, but that said, the 4-set team buff isn't as strong as what Moonlit Lullaby provides, and as you've probably likely guessed, another reason to use Moonlit Lullaby is obviously because this is the set that was designed for Lucia. Now for 2-piece sets, there's also a bit more flexibility. If you want to maximize her kit, running Swing Jazz 2-piece is the most straightforward and obvious option, as energy regen remains a very important stat. But as for alternatives, Yunquei Tails is another solid pick since the HP it provides scales her supportive healing and regeneration effects, alongside increasing the amount of sheer force that she adds. Overall though, she's quite focused on stacking energy regen whenever she can find it, so with a little mixing and matching, you can optimize her build depending on what pieces you have available. For her main stats, the most important focus here is to make sure she gains value out of her buffs, while also ensuring that she doesn't feel clunky or run out of energy too quickly. With this, alternating between energy regen and HP percent on disc 6 is pretty important, as this will ensure she can either cycle her EX special more frequently or increase the amount of sheer force that she provides. But aside from this, HP on disc 4 and 5 are a given, as she needs at least or close to 24,000 health to maximize her buff. But overall, while this isn't a strict setup she has to follow, her build should lean heavily toward energy regen / making sure she doesn't run out of energy in combat, and then of course trying to maximize her sheer force increase. Now though the guide will have more info on this, I did also notice that many of you were curious about the stat line that Lucia will be looking for. However, as the character is not yet available live, I'd originally believed that including a stat line here would seem odd, as you can't even build her yet. Regardless though, the ideal stat line that you're looking for with Lucia is at least 24,000 health, 2.18 energy regen, and basically any other stats, as getting to 24,000 HP is no easy task. But as an alternative to this, if you choose to use energy regen as her 6th slot, you'd be looking for roughly 2.18 to 3.12 energy regen and at least 22,000 HP. Now let's talk about Lucia's pros and cons and whether she's actually worth pulling for. As for her pros, Lucia's team-wide damage increases are some of the highest that we've ever seen, and to this end, I even tested runs without the super insane Deadly Assault buff that may have skewed her performance. Now while the buff itself accounted for a massive 5 to 7,000 damage increase, even without said enhancement, she still improved the Deadly Assault scores of agents like Xuan or Monado by roughly 8 to 12,000 by herself. Now to add to this, she's also the first real Astra level Rupture support, where Yuzuha and Astra of course have insane value when paired with Anomaly and Attack agents respectively. On top of this, she can also heal and increase max HP, which makes the team healthier and survive longer, even despite this technically being dedicated for sheer force damage. And finally, her Aftershocks and Harmonies from off-field actually deal pretty respectable damage. That said, in terms of cons, she has a few. Maximizing her stat line can feel a bit difficult, as I was nowhere near 24,000 without using a combination of her signature and 3 HP percent main stats for those of you looking to try and use 2-piece energy regen and 6-slot energy regen disc. But on the topic of discs, it doesn't feel like she has that much variety and viable disc drives, as she's essentially locked to Moonlit Lullaby and Swing Jazz if she wants to buff Rupture specific agents. Now to add to this, managing her dream points might seem pretty easy, but anytime that she enters field, she can pretty easily and sometimes unintentionally use dream points. Now this might not seem that big a deal, but this can sometimes lead to you losing your dream state without having a way to quickly reapply it, though this isn't necessarily the biggest deal in the world, as the duration of many of her buffs are pretty long. Now while she does also do amazingly with Rupture agents, it is also unfortunate that this also means that she struggles when not with them, which can feel frustrating if the Deadly Assault rotation doesn't offer HP/Rupture buffs during said phase. So overall guys, Lucia is a support designed for players who really want to get the most out of their Rupture agents. She actively improves her team's DPS through off-field damage, Rupture-based damage increases, and the ability to heal, but more than anything else, the fact that her kit is so versatile really makes her an insane option for any Rupture-based team. With this, if you already have or plan to invest in Rupture agents, or if you want a buffer who adds steady personal damage, Lucia is an incredibly strong pick. With this, if you're a player willing to build around her strengths, you will definitely find crazy success and results with Lucia, even if the current Deadly Assault does kind of skew things to make Lucia even wilder than you'd think. Ultimately though, I would still recommend and will be personally pulling for Lucia, even if just to make my Monado way stronger, but as I'm sure many of you will find, she really does just act as an insane DPS steroid for any Rupture agent, be it Monado, Xuan, or even very likely Idhari. Thanks again for watching though guys, I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.